you say it's easy to get on in jail, meaning drugs, but due to searches and shakedowns, isn't the risk of getting caught too high? All right. So, thanks for another awesome question, Stevie. I'll probably have other questions in front of you. This is correct, but yes, it was an awesome question. So we're going to get to it. So, um, you know, as I've spoke about in previous videos, maybe not at length, but it is getting harder and harder and harder to get these drugs in prisons, and because of some of the new screening methods that they have in prisons. I know it like MRC, they have like state of the art equipment there, and they have this thing that you walk through and it blows air on you, and it must blow like particles around in the little round thing that's kind of like a little shower like cubicle. And I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I know that they've got different ones as well. And they've also got ones that we use inside, like and people have commented on this as well, like they now have the scanners where you can sit down on that and it will tell you if you've got anything metal inside you at all. It can pick up phones and electrical goods. It can pick up anything that's metal or steel. Um, and then they've got the security their job basically is the whole time is to look for drugs and shanks and things like that, because it is a great risk of people overdosing in prison, more so than on the outside, because for most in prison, drugs isn't something that people can afford every day, other than drugs other than bupe. And it's dangerous because, people that have heroin habits outside, and, let's say they've been using bupe every day and rah, 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 and then one day they decide to have, a heroin shot, which is usually how these people die in prison. And because their tolerance is low, because they haven't used in a while, or haven't been using as often and as much as they would on the outside, the risk then obviously multiplies due to how long that they have been in prison. And they've got dogs and everything that search. But yeah, the security basically is there to look for people and drugs the whole time, and they do have dogs. And what else do they have? So I know at MRC as well, they've got, if you smoke marijuana in prison at MRC, generally people will use the toilet roll, which just gave me a good idea. Actually, I'm going to do a video on this. I'll make a jail bong and show you guys how ingenious it is and simple. But yeah, they have these things there. So in order to use one of these, it's just a toilet roll with a bit of foil in it. That's all it is. And so in order to use it, you got to put one hand on the back of the toilet roll, and then obviously the other bit in your mouth. And yeah, and so obviously you would have residue on your hand from marijuana. And so what they were doing at one stage, and they still do it, they will swab your hands, and that also tests for alcohol as well. So it will test for most drugs, I believe, but mainly for weed. Yeah, it's very easy to get caught smoking weed that way. But the truth is, it's not going to matter how much the people implement in the prison to stop you from taking drugs and being able to buy drugs. It's never ever going to stop it. So as long as there is corruption, so not even, it doesn't even matter. Like there's a million different ways that people get it in. I've spoke on it briefly. I won't give all the secrets away, but I've spoke about the drones. It's a fact. It's all over the news about the drones, and I've told you how easy it used to be at Port Phillip, and you know, but as long as there is corruption and ways to get screws to do things rather than getting your own people in trouble, then they will never ever stop it. And regardless of, you know, they will say on the news, "Oh, we've got this new drug detector dog. It's an absolute genius, and it does this and that." So the bupe dog 9 times out of 10 won't even smell the bupe that's on you, and not only that, I've also said that, like, you know a lot of the percentage of most prisons use bupe at most times. And so, it's just funny to watch when they bring this bupe smelling dog that can sniff bupe out. um, Never sits at the people's feet just for smoking bupe, when the bupe smoke would be all over them, because you generally do it in your cell, and small space smoking. You would just think, but they are absolutely hopeless. And yeah, it's not going to matter what people try to implement. Criminals in prison have nothing but time to think about how they're going to beat the system, and you better believe that that's what they do with most of their time, is thinking of ways they can beat that system in some way, shape, or form. So, don't believe all the hoo-ha that you hear on fake news and whatnot, because I can tell you right now that all these U-boot methods that they believe that stop things from happening, um, we will always find a way. And by we, I mean, like, that those people in prison that have been to prison, are very, very effective at finding ways around things, and they do, and they will, and they will continue to do it. Um, so, the answer to that is, yeah, definitely, no matter what. It's never. It might be harder at some prisons because they're a bit more full on with all that stuff, like, I know it's harder at Barwon than it is. It's harder everywhere other than Port Phillip, basically, and Fulham, actually, because they're both privately run prisons, and um, they're more worried about making money than spending money, like on new security and whatnot. And so it's always going to be harder in them places, and then places like, Barwon or MRC, and like, Margany, and I know Ravenhall actually is a private jail, but it's pretty new. But also, from what I've been told, so they hired a lot of first timer screws there that haven't worked in any other prisons, and they got a handful of screws that had worked in Port Phillip and MRC and things like that. But what I was told is that they were all young, very green screws, so people were getting away with a lot in there, and um, yeah, so that's the answer to that one, is that, you know as much as some people might say, "Oh, well, that's shit," that, but yeah, it's not hard to get drugs in prison. And as a matter of fact, I've said this a number of times, it is a lot easier to get drugs in prison, and simply for the fact that you don't have to get in your car and drive anywhere. The furthest you have to walk is to the fence to the other yard if it's coming from another yard. But other than that, it's definitely not harder. You've got, you know, more population of people in that small area that take and use drugs every day. So the chances of getting drugs just on that fact alone is pretty high. Whereas in the community, you may have, one or two streets, one or two houses out of a street that do drugs, maybe, and probably more these days. I don't know. Just using a reference point. But you guys get the point. What I'm basically trying to say is there's a smaller population of people, but a greater density of drug users. So, you know, just with that fact alone, you're always going to find drugs around, and especially if the drugs that these people are taking are habit forming drugs. And yeah, so basically it's not going to matter, and not only that, people actually are on these drugs in prison. Now I know that they're trying to stop that now, but you are never going to be able to stop people taking a drug. You might be able to swap them over like they're doing, swapping people over from taking the bupe, like the bupe strips. Instead of giving them strips now, they're giving them an injection that lasts for a month. So they have to have one injection a month, and it does its job, what it would do if you were taking a tablet or taking the strip. Um, so, and same with pills as well, and same with methadone. People even get their methadone out, and, people have found ways to somehow make it look like they are putting methadone in their mouth, and they are definitely not, and it's going in a cup somewhere stashed on their body, and they managed to get it through, two lots of strip search. So, you know it's not going to matter what people try and do, because they will always come up with ways around it. It's the same with new cars. They come up with all these new boot things that stop thieves from getting it, and later on that year they've bypassed that security and they can get them cars again. So it doesn't matter what car you have, someone knows how to steal that car, I promise you. And this is another thing what people do in prison. They spend all their time to learn new crimes as well. And so, add that with being very craftful, you will always going to have drugs in prison. But like I said, as long as you have corruption, and also just on that fact alone, as long as you have screws that are going to be getting offered 10 times more money than they get paid, you're always going to have cracks in your system. Because your gang, your crew, your work environment, your screws are only strong as your weakest link, and all it takes is that one weak link to break, and yeah, the rest comes down with it. But there you go, guys. Yeah, that's the answer to that question, which is, are they going to be able to, does it make it harder? And absolutely, it does not make it harder to get drugs with, all their new flash things and dogs and this and that. Nothing is, going to stop this. Yeah, the war on drugs is forever going to be getting fought in prison. And yeah, which leads me to the part of the video where I say that, drugs, jail, and crime ruined my life and took up a massive, massive portion of my life, half of my life. And I wasted so many years in jail. I wasted so much time and money on drugs, and wasted, yep, a lot of time wasting time on crime, if that makes sense. So, all right, guys, I've been the Chaos Chronicles. We out.
I am also the guy who decides if you and your friends walk out of here or not.